All right. Welcome everyone to Straight Science. Straight Science is a evening science seminar series put on by the University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest campus here in Nome and University of Alaska Fairbanks Alaska Sea Grant. And tonight you're in the home office. And both UAF Alaska Sea Grant and Northwest Campus, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region and serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Inupiaq, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Central Yupik peoples. So tonight we're going a little bit outside of the Bering Strait region, but if it has anything to do with Walrus, it doesn't matter. We're going to ask them to come and give us the latest news. Walrus kind of anyway, it's all about walrus in the Bering Strait region. So we want to hear it all. And Tony Fischbach it's not his first Straight Science rodeo. He is exceptional in that he likes to come to Straight Science and bring us the data of the latest that they're learning on walruses. And tonight we were, Tony will talk more about this, but our speaker from Point Lay is under the weather. There is cold sickness going around up in the North Slope Borough. And that is something that they're dealing with. And unfortunately, our speaker is under the weather, but he has talked to Tony, and I think Tony's got some slides and things like that. Tony Fischbach will be speaking to us, and he is, well, first off, Robert Lisbourne is the North Slope Borough Point Lay's representative for the Fish and Game Council. So he is the commissioner and has been working with Tony, and we'll hear more about that. And Tony Fischbach, who will be the speaker tonight, he will be pulling it off. He is a walrus research biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Anchorage at the Alaska Science Center. And you may think, now, wait a minute, did they say U.S. Geological Survey? That is correct. We're all aware that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has management authority for walruses and polar bears when it comes to marine mammals. And for research on walruses and polar bears, we won't talk about sea otters, but walruses and polar bears, it is the purview of the U.S. Geological Survey. Thus, we get Tony, who is an outstanding walrus research biologist for the USGS. With that, Tony, we're so glad to have you here. Take it away. Let's hear what the latest news is about walruses. Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be able to bring some of the insights we've got and a little bit of a story about the work we're doing in teamwork with North Slope Borough and residents up further to the north. I'm very sad to say that Robert Lisbourne is unable to make it tonight. He's not feeling well. There's been a fever going through town where he is, and but beforehand we've been texting a whole bunch. He wrote me whole paragraphs about their management practices, and we've had long discussions while working together this last September. Here you see Robert. He is a person who can do a lot of things. He's been elected by the native village of Point Lay to represent them to the North Slope Borough, to the commission that oversees fish and game with the North Slope Borough. I'll try to advance some slides here. So Robert provided some quotes and a few photos from his life in Point Lay to introduce his community. And then we'll talk about what his community has to do with Bering Straits region. These are quotes from Robert. Point Lay is a community that is very blessed by having access to caribou. Robert sums up the life in Point Lay really well. It's not a place to visit, it's home. There are many opportunities for harvest there. It's a small community. People are very active. They reestablished whaling, spring whaling. They've even tried autumn whaling in recent years, but they whale without mechanized equipment out on the fast ice. Here you see them doing the work, Robert and his brother. You can imagine how wonderful that is to be on the fast ice and be doing this work together as a community. They celebrate Naluktatuk. You saw him in the air. They use bearded seal instead of walrus skin. And that is the bearded seal skin that came off the boat that successfully landed the whale. So there's a great sense of tradition within the community that people are keeping alive and reestablishing. It's a lot of energy in the community. Recently, as in less than 2 decades ago, back in 2007, for the first time, walruses came to shore in large numbers. They always came by a few here and there, but starting in 2007, they started coming by in large numbers, and this is the female walruses. Well, I won't talk about this too much, but these are Robert's words about this. I'll just give his words here. Here you see Raphael Stimmelmeyer from the North Slope Borough, a research veterinarian with North Slope Borough, doing the work that she does to investigate causes of death of some of the walruses, seeing why if these walruses had died during some stampede events, if they had any signs of avian influenza or algal blooms. She's done some investigations on that. We're waiting to hear her findings. I don't have those to share right now, but you can see the words from Robert that the community understood the hazard of having tens of thousands of walruses together. When they're disturbed, they can move in a rush to the water, and in that process, some walruses can be crushed. The people in Point Lay saw this, and they recognized, we can see Robert's words here, realized we had to protect the walruses when they come to our beach. They take it very seriously. They're very attentive, keeping an eye on the walrus, and they work as a community to meet the community's needs and do it in a way that is safe for the walruses. You can see his words here. Maybe I should read them for those who are on the phone. Within our people, not everyone agreed at first. We had to harvest in a smarter way to not cause a stampede. People do harvest when there's a small group that won't cause a stampede. I investigate afterwards, it's Robert, to make sure there's no harm. Lessons were learned for a greater purpose in the future. These are all words that he sent to me to describe how they're doing things. He indicated that they do not allow tourists, and this is true. There is no place to stay in Point Lay. They have been approached by an actual large tour boat, like you've seen in Nome, came to the community a few years back, indicated that they would pay well to come ashore, and he indicated to me that the community spoke about this and decided no, they didn't want to have that happen in their community. They wanted to protect the walruses. The community also is very attentive, watching the herd across. It's only a mile across from where people are living. They can see all the activity of the brown bears. In the recent years, there have been quite a few brown bears and polar bears that have been showing up. And here you can see, those of you who can see the video, you can see a walrus, a young walrus that had presumably died on the beach in some manner, and then it had been taken apart by a polar bear. And I suspect that hunters in the Bering Straits region have seen this as well, where they'll find the carcass of a young walrus where it had been pulled out, the parts the walrus, the polar bear wanted to eat were removed, and there was just a cut made in the face. And then the rest of the hide is just empty. You can almost turn that into a poke for whaling. We do see polar bears there during the walrus season. Here you see a print. So Robert, in his role as commissioner, working with Fish and Wildlife for the North Slope Borough Committee, has a role of teamwork, helping with the school, helping with researchers such as myself, guiding the researchers and teachers and leading school groups and explaining the history of management to the students in the high school. Here you see him in the high school, helping out with our camp safety and bringing teachers over. So this was the presentation that Robert would have given. He would have had much more to say than I did there. Now I'll step back and provide a bit of a background about USGS. The USGS is a science agency within the Department of Interior. We have no management authority. Our mission is to develop tools and provide insights to support the management of walruses. We work with managers at the federal level as well as the borough level. We work closely with the Eskimo Walrus Commission whenever we have new ideas about doing studies or learn about studies that they want to see done. We bring them ideas and ask for their insights on this and whether they will support that. We also work with local communities through the Native Village, the IRA councils. When I'm a classically trained ecologist. When I first arrived in Alaska in the mid 1990s, I had little more understanding of walruses than 16th century European monks. Luckily, I was introduced to walruses by Siberian Yupik hunting families with whom I served 4 years as their Fish and Wildlife Service harvest monitor. Here, some of you may recognize Walla, who worked with harvest monitoring. The people of Gamble included me in their harvest efforts, and they shared the undeniable joy that comes from participating in practices that sustain their community. Through their guidance, I came to understand that this joy is expressed across the Bering Strait in both Russia and Alaska by 7 linguistically distinct peoples for which walruses are central to cultural identity and food security. Here on the right, you can see Isla, you may recognize Isla Ungut, who has the skill of preparing the skin for a boat. And on the left, you see walrus hunters over, I believe it was in Serenity. So tonight I'll present a little background on some studies that we've been doing with USGS. I'll start with giving a general background on walrus distribution, what we understand from the tool set of wildlife biologists, and give a little background on what we understand about how changes in sea ice availability are affecting walruses. Then I'll dive into a number of studies that we're doing at coastal haulouts to meet the requirements, the legal requirements of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. I'll just jump into this and follow this outline for the rest of the talk. We'll start with walrus distribution and changes in sea ice. People in this region are very familiar with the distribution of walruses. Here I've represented that with, you see the gray is the land, Alaska and the Russian Far East on the other side. And I'm representing here both the winter distribution in blue, where they gather in the Polinias, south and a little bit west of in the Gulf of Nadir and south of St. Lawrence Island and over there by Nunivak Island waters. And in the summer, the females travel north with the ice and occupy the shallow waters of the Chukchi Sea. The red areas up there, you can see we've been able to describe by actually following individual walruses using small tags we put onto them, small tags like this. We've been able to learn that there are specific regions, the Chukchi Sea, that they're occupying during the summer, and that's indicated with that salmon color. You also see red dots on shore, and this is where they have been reported to come ashore in large numbers at these traditionally used locations termed haulouts. Here I'll show a video clip of tracking data that kind of tells the story of how walruses are using the Chukchi Sea. Here we are. So the gray and light blue, this is the sea ice, marginal ice, and that leaves the continental shelf. You can see that suddenly they come to shore, they stream over to Point Lay, where Robert lives. And after they occupy that region for a while, then they go over to Russia, across the Bering Strait, where our partners across the Bering Strait have been studying walruses and living with them for a time immemorial as well. So as mentioned before, 15 of the last 17 years, they've come to shore in these large numbers. This is unusual. So traditionally, female walruses have occupied continental shelf waters by resting on sea ice. Apparently they're unable to get adequate rest without a platform. So they pull themselves out of the water onto sea ice traditionally. When that ice suddenly became unavailable across the Chukchi Sea in 2007, they came to shore in large numbers, forming large groups as opposed to what you see in the sea ice of 5, 10, 50 or so on small pans of ice. Here you're seeing tens of thousands all gathered together in tight groups. This happens both in Alaska and over on the Russian side as well. When they're on shore like this, it's an opportunity for us to ask questions, raises lots of questions, what they're doing on shore, which walruses are there, what's the composition of walruses, and also how many are involved, all sorts of questions like this. Before, we had done most of our efforts to ask these questions using people observing from aircraft. We charter an aircraft and go and look that way. Turns out it's very difficult to do that when they're on shore because the conditions are not conducive for flying. You have to stay pretty far away from these walruses. They're very sensitive to the sound of aircraft. So to be safe, you have to stay far away, or you have to have a rare day when you have very high clouds or even blue sky. That doesn't happen very often. 2014, we tried to do some aerial surveys at this location in Point Lay, and we were only able to do about one or two with 5 weeks of waiting for the aircraft to be able to launch at Borough and also be able to do the survey at Point Lay. We said, oh, boy, I wish we had something smaller, but we can just use a camera, a small flying camera. Eventually, this came to be possible. Everybody's familiar with drones now. This is a drone that we've been using recently. It's very quiet. We like it because it flies like a fixed wing aircraft. It takes off on its tail. I think I have a video of it working. Robert refers to these as Google gadgets, and they really are. It's a little gadget. It takes a lot to get it to work right, but it's very quiet when it does work. And I'll show you this video if that works. It makes a fair bit of noise when it's coming up and down, but once it comes out flying like an airplane, it becomes very quiet because it gets all the lift from the wings and just keeps moving forward. It's super quiet, about the same sound level as you have from a refrigerator across the room in somebody's kitchen. And it's able to carry a good camera, which allows it to fly quickly and really high, so walruses aren't affected by it. And with that, we can get good data to answer some questions. So I'll talk about some of the questions we're trying to ask by working with the community of Point Lay. So I don't know if can you hear the walrus voices here?
Can we hear what? I'm sorry, this is Gay.
The walruses?
It is not, at least on my computer, and I could be slow, but it's not moving. This is the film.
So I'll just show a few photos that you can collect with a flying camera like this. And as you zoom in, you can see that essentially all these walruses are females and some young. If you look in, you can see the very feminine shape of these walruses. They've got that narrow skull, very feminine looking. And then you can see lots of calves in here. I think in the next, maybe I even highlight them. So by looking down, we can actually get the age sex composition of them. We may also be able to replicate the way they've done age sex composition from the bridge of a ship by having a different type of drone hover off over the water and look in with a telephoto lens. We're interested in trying that as well. The age sex composition can be very useful for informing trends which are required to be understood under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The age sex composition is one of the few pieces of data that really has informed models that help us understand the trajectory of the population. Traditionally, these have been collected offshore from a vessel, and we're exploring the possibility of collecting these onshore. Up here, you can see, I'm zooming in. Here, these are all females, very feminine looking walruses with that narrow head and the small tusks, the narrow tusks. And then you can also see so many calves. When you look at these herds on shore, there's a lot of calves. Another aspect of the population we want to know is how they're doing in terms of body condition and growth. Previous USGS studies have forecast that walruses must use more energy to accommodate increased loss of sea ice. When sea ice is not present, they have to swim more and they end up resting less. And the expectation is that this will result in them needing to use more energy. If they're unable to compensate by eating more, we anticipate that they would lose body condition if we continue to have long ice-free conditions during the summer. And if those conditions do increase during the season, that may cause a stress in the walrus population, and we may see a loss of body condition. This may also affect the growth of calves. The USGS study led by Karen Rode in partnership with zoos across the US and Europe developed a body condition monitoring method based on survey drones. If USGS can measure walrus body condition over the course of the coming years, we may better understand how walruses are responding to sea ice loss, and if in fact this is going to affect their population. It's an inexpensive and non-intrusive way to put a pulse on the population and get an idea about how it may be going by relating any changes to changes in sea ice. When on shore, we may survey walrus herds for abundance and gain insights in the regional and perhaps larger population. The Marine Mammal Protection Act requires us to report the minimum population size, and that's used for management purposes in discussion with management partners. When planned and processed rigorously, drone surveys can provide herd density at these large herds, as well as herd abundance. And when coupled with telemetry by putting radio tags on walruses at the same time, we can correct the estimate of the herds on shore to estimate the number of walruses in the region. Herd density estimates from drone surveys can also enable onshore herd abundance estimates from satellite imagery at any haulout across the entire range. So we're pushing into that as an idea. Here you can see the satellite image, the satellite tags that we used to correct, to understand what proportion were in the water during these onshore surveys. And here you can see the results. So we're able to estimate the number of walruses that are using Point Lay during the ice-free season, which is represented by this salmon-colored map here. On the right-hand side, from Hannah Shoal down through Ledyard Bay, and then Point Lay is right there in the middle. And here you can see the estimate, the number of walruses in this graph, and the uncertainty around those estimates. So during a 2-year study, we got about the same answer. And that was a bit surprising for us that there were that many walruses occupying, coming to rest on shore, coming and going continuously. But overall, it was over 150,000 walruses that were coming to shore. To put this in context, here I'm showing the another way to get at the abundance, which is based on genetic marker capture effort. So working offshore from research vessels over the course of a 5-year study, Fish and Wildlife Service teamed up with a researcher at USGS, Bill Beatty, and Rebecca Taylor, who's online here, may be able to better describe this than I can. For 5 years, they collected thousands of biopsies using crossbows. Teams would go out and find the walruses. This has been presented previously during the Strait Science, so you may be familiar with this. Here is the result of that for the female sector of the population. And the remarkable thing about this, and you can see this is estimated for this entire region where the females are occupying the Chukchi Sea and a little bit of the Gulf of Nadir throughout the summer. The remarkable thing about that abundance estimate is that it basically came up with the same numbers as we saw occupying the Point Lay haulout. We know the Point Lay haulout composition is primarily females and calves. There are a few young males in there and an occasional adult male, but it's predominantly females and calves. So it's remarkable that we're seeing the same numbers of abundance from these two very different ways of getting abundance estimates, using looking down with the drone where you can get that, and then estimating the abundance regionally using telemetry, and then this other method of genetic marker capture, coming up with the same answer. This suggests that Point Lay is hosting the bulk of the females and calves in the entire population. If you think about that for a moment, it's a lot of responsibility for Robert and the community of Point Lay. Basically, when walruses are there, they have responsibility for the reproductive portion of the population. And I believe that they really understand that, and that this is what is inspiring people in Point Lay to take these actions to manage walruses in a way to protect them. I'm going to step over and talk about new methods we're looking into. So using drones is is useful. And the drone methodology had been pioneered by our Russian partners across northern Chukotka. Currently, we're unable to work directly with our Russian partners, but we can look down at locations in Russia or anywhere where walruses come to shore. We actually can see walruses. We can determine how large the walrus herd is, how much area it occupies. And here in the image here on the left in pink, you can see that walruses have a very bright backscatter from a radar pulse. When a radar pulse is flown over the walruses at about 2,000 miles above the earth, looking down, we can resolve where the walruses are based on how very different they appear from the sandy and gravelly substrate. You can outline that with a green magic marker there. You can see in green, and I can estimate the area. And from that, we can learn about how many walruses are on shore at any location that we choose to look. And this location that you're looking at here is close to where Edward Zador grew up, and you may have heard of him. He may pop in later if there's any questions about this. And you're seeing about 200,000 walruses in this image alone. So if you look at the satellite image, the backscatter pattern here on the very right is an image. This shows variability in how bright those walruses are. And we suspect that that variability is related directly to the density of walruses. So when they're on shore, they form really dense herds, like shoulder to shoulder, but that density varies a fair bit. We know that from the previous drone surveys where we can count the walruses and determine how dense they are and see how variable that is. So if I just draw the outline using my green magic marker, I would get an estimate, but the estimate would be imprecise because we know walruses can vary in how dense they are. But we believe that we can get information directly from the patterns you see here within the that satellite image. So this last summer, with the help of Robert at Point Lay, we flew drone surveys at the very same time the satellite was flying by. We were able to get this orange drone in the sky, take the image, and here you can see the herd as seen, we'll call ground truth, from 400 feet above the walruses. And here you see what it looks like from 4,000 kilometers above the walruses. So this is an ongoing study. We need to do analysis on that and see if we can use that to get an abundance estimates at places where we cannot do surveys. Now, I want to step back and give a few insights that we've gotten from using satellite imagery, how we can use it for management, providing information to managers, and how we can understand how walruses, what proportion of the walrus population may be experiencing new vessel activity in their habitat. Here's an example of providing satellite imagery products to the local village of Point Lay in the North Slope Borough Fish and Wildlife Service, in which we had a time when walruses decided to come ashore right next to the barge landing site. There's one good place to bring a barge ashore at Point Lay. And here you see on the right, two barges side by side that have come to shore with the guidance of local people who were given these maps to help guide them to come in quietly and do it without disturbing these walruses. About 5 football fields away, you can see these walrus herds that were there. They seem to remain there on shore when that vessel was coming in here for about 18 hours. They run out of tube connected to the system there in Point Lay and deliver the fuel that the community needs for the winter. So that's one way we can use satellite imagery, is to directly support managers when they need additional insights to avoid any concerns with vessels. Of course, in Russia, we don't have any control over what's going on with vessels. I guess we'll get back to that story in a bit. Here's Nome with the yellow heart in the corner. And then I want to show what we can learn from satellite imagery about the distribution and how many are on shore. So we can understand the regional monitoring, because we can look anywhere that satellites are looking. We can reach over to archives of satellite images that are routinely collected by agencies. The European Space Agency collects several types of imagery almost daily. There's a number of commercial operators that collect imagery almost daily. And then we can ask for special images to be taken. And here you can see the result of that. So in the map here on the left, you can see Nome, and you can see Point Lay, the teal colored dot. And then over here is the red dot, where walruses come ashore and have been seen on shore with very large numbers. So, and these other gray dots were locations where we had reports of 10,000 walruses on shore during the previous several decades. So let's look there intensely as well. So we looked intensely at all these places during 2022 for the first time by actually asking for additional satellite images of these locations. And here on the right, you can see the results of that. For a geeky biologist, it's really exciting because this is like the equivalent of having flown all these surveys at all these locations. Of course, no walruses were disturbed by the satellite going overhead, but we have the information about the size of the haulout, and we can estimate the number that were on shore at each location during each satellite overpass. So here in the right-hand side in that graph, you can see we estimate the number of walrus on shore as the product of the area that herd occupied and the density of walruses that may vary here. So there's our estimate, and you can see the uncertainty as these little bars up and down. But the basic story is we can see how walruses occupy Point Lay earlier in the season, coming ashore sometime in early mid-August, and continue to occupy the haulout near Point Lay throughout the season until about early October. And at that time, we see about the same number appear over on the Russian side across the Bering Strait. We know from our tracking studies that there's a direct migratory route between Alaska, Point Lay, over to this location on the red dot there on the map. And then to our great surprise, we saw this huge number come up here. And this was shortly after Murbach. So we suspect there was something that was going on with the winds with Murbach that may have somehow affected the number that came ashore. We don't know, but we'll be looking at a little bit more closely and trying to relate that to what we do know. So this gives us an idea about how many walruses are occupying these areas. Previous studies had documented this migratory route going from occupying the Hannah Shoal here, coming to using Point Lay, and then flowing over to Russia. We do know that when they're over on the Russian side, these walruses are co-occurring with a substantial amount of vessel traffic. And this is something that is new. On the US side, we're familiar with the sort of vessel traffic that we have here. It's primarily these barges that are servicing communities. On the Russian side, we're seeing something very different. Vessel traffic is vastly expanded on the Russian side. Most remarkably are the ultra-large ice-breaking LNG tankers and the pollock trawlers, as well as an increasing presence of military vessels. And Gay Sheffield can tell you more about this. Here's a short video of what this looks like when these very large vessels are working through thin ice, which they can just plow right through at speed. We do walruses can be entangled in fishing gear. Here's a video from a Russian vessel that's captured the walrus and tangled the walrus. And we know this is a concern. And I think Gay can speak more to how many vessels are up there near these walrus haulouts on the Russian side. Of course, on the US side, there's no fishery activity north of the Bering Strait. So from the satellite imagery data, we can determine that a substantial portion of the population is occurring where there is substantial vessel traffic. We understand this is a concern. How to put that concern into context is going to be a challenge. And then what to do for management is another challenge. And I just threw in a little bit about the numbers of walruses that are in this vessel traffic. So that when that number of walruses on shore is shown here in red, you can see the range-wide abundance estimate for females and young overlaps with the estimated number of walruses on shore. Again, indicating that the vast majority of females and young in the whole population are co-occurring with this novel vessel traffic. I did mention earlier that when walruses are on shore, they can be startled and rush in a panic into the water. In that process, walrus can be trampled. It's hard to get an idea about how many are being trampled this way because it requires you're there in a timely manner to count the carcasses before they're moved around by storms or by bears. In 2009, we first observed that at an icy cape, and it's been observed at a number of locations in Russia. At times, it's been large numbers that have died during trampling events, approaching 1,000. It's hard to get those counts because it's a timely thing you have to do. So we're looking into the possibility of using satellite imagery to get at the counts of walruses that are being killed during these trampling events. It is required for the stock assessment process to understand how many walruses are being removed from the population through this novel form of removal. So previously, when they were using offshore sea ice, they would have not had these trampling events like this. But when they're on these large haulouts on shore with the absence of sea ice, they are dying through trampling events, and we need to put that into context with the stock assessment reporting process. So we're working with local people to survey for carcasses, but we also can look down from space using commercial satellites that any of us can show up with a credit card and ask to be tasked, and we can actually see them very brightly in some of the satellites. It's a challenge to understand what's a walrus and what's a rusty barrel. So you have to get a number of images earlier in the season. I still need to understand what our error rates are in counting carcasses using this methodology. This is an ongoing study, and I'll show you the actual images. So with the drones, you can see very clearly carcasses that appear to have appeared after bears were active near this herd. And if you look down here using a satellite, you also can see carcasses. Well, I also can see other things like these other features on the shore. So it's not a real clear view. Again, we're using radar imagery, which sees through clouds, but it doesn't give you like a lot of, doesn't give you the clarity you would get with a visual image. So this is an ongoing study. And all these studies are only possible through partnership and teamwork that we have. So the study efforts rely on contributions from indigenous communities and organizations and from our Russian colleagues' published works. USGS Walrus Program at Alaska Science Center looks forward to expanding involvement with Native communities to conserve walrus for the benefit of communities across the Bering Straits. And I just want to open it up for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Tony. That was awesome. Just your graphics alone, much less all the information. That was so beautifully done. I was not, for your audience, I was chunking in the papers that you were showing.
Oh, thank you.
So for some people who want to get more of that Western science read, but the one I did not find was, and that was, I was slow on the draw, was the trampling deaths paper.
Oh, okay. I'll see
If you could do that. And then, Doug, I see your hand up. But before we begin with questions, this is the time where we the Straight Science audience, we thank and show some love to our speaker, Tony Fischbach. It is never easy being a straight science speaker, or a public speaker, and show some love. Thank you, Tony, for taking time out this evening to give us such a beautiful presentation on an animal that we are all so interested in the Bering Strait region. Beautifully done. And we do have a caller, and Doug, hold one more. We do have a caller. Callers have priority. If there's any question from the caller, this would be a great time to unmute *6, or if you must, if there's no, sometimes it gets gummed up, call 907-434-1149 or text me the question and I'll ask it out for Tony. So with that, all right, lots of kudos. Very nice, Tony. I'm not alone in thinking great presentation. Doug Molyneux, you've been patient. Go ahead.
Great talk there, Tony. I really enjoyed it. I'm just wondering about those trampling events. That must be a real boon for the polar bears. So can you kind of touch on that? They have their own issues they're dealing with, a lack of sea ice and stuff, and it just seems having that extra availability of protein must be of a real help for them. Can you comment on that?
It's a great question. I don't have much insight on that other than that whenever I've been working at these coastal haulouts with walruses present, we have seen polar bears. They tend to be pretty shy. We had one this year that was sleeping right within a stone's throw of our tent. A young one apparently. We never saw him, but we can see the day beds that he had used at night, and then we would also see the carcasses that he had been there. He would drag down into the surf and handle them in a very polar bear sort of way, where he would just eat the calf without making any incisions into the body of the calf, and just you have these pelts there that were pretty much empty. So that was remarkable. How many polar bears are involved with that activity is unclear. We've seen evidence of, you only see their tracks and their day beds. I've actually never seen a polar bear onshore when we're there. They're pretty shy. The community reports seeing polar bears as well, so we know that they're there before we're there, and hear some really great insights. I wish Robert were here to fill that in, because of course they're there all the time looking. I think it's a great opportunity to ask some questions. I know that Andy Van Duke up at North Slope Borough has developed a methodology to do basically genetic marker capture by collecting saliva, by putting out little like a lollipop sort of thing that a polar bear would take an interest in. So there may be methods that we can understand how many bears are involved with this by using that methodology. And there's certainly insights from local people. We also see brown bears at these sites. We've seen them when we were out there doing aerial surveys with the drones. They're a little bit more bold, not so much concerned about people. They seem to be more aggressive in pushing the walruses. We've definitely seen quite a few trampling deaths, and heard accounts from people living in Point Lay that brown bears were involved with those trampling deaths. So there's a number of stories there. How much it changes the equation for polar bears, I don't know. I hope that gives as much information as I've got.
All right, you got a thumbs up from Doug, so well done. Sue
Hey,
Moore
Sue?
has her hand up. Go ahead, Sue.
Yes, well, thanks, Gay. And first, thank you again so much for keeping the Straight Science series going. It's really great. And
Thanks.
Tony, you know I'm a long-term fan of the work you've been doing on a lot of levels. Tonight is no exception. I'm sorry that Robert couldn't join, but I have two questions. One is related to the drone imagery and body condition, and that is whether or not Robert or others from Point Lay could also provide some information on what they assessed as the walrus body condition there. And I'll just ask the second one now. And the other is a satellite imagery, which is, I think, terrific and a way of at least bridging to some extent the lack of information we're able to exchange with our colleagues in Russia. So you showed the barges coming in and how it was, done with the least impact through the satellite imagery near Point Ley. I'm wondering if there's any way that that can be provided with regard to ship traffic along the Chukotka coast. So those are two kind of different scale questions, one based on drones, one based on satellite imagery, but take them as you will. Anyway, thank you for your good work.
Thank you, Sue. So for the first one, the body condition. So one thing I'm doing this next year, at least I'm hoping to do, we're planning to do, is I have an agreement with the Museum of the North, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, with Edward Zador, who is a native Chilcotin walrus hunter, grew up hunting walruses and marine mammals, is now moved to Alaska with his family for over a decade, and with an asylum request. Just got his PhD in cultural anthropology, so he'll be my field partner next year. And the goal there was to work with him, that there may be some opportunities with that, where he can draw out some information or work with people in the community to see if there's a way that we can get an understanding if they're seeing changes over time with the walrus body condition. So there's certainly opportunities to look at that. When we're on the ground with walruses, we work with a veterinarian at the North Slope Borough, Raphaela Stimmelmeyer, and she's done assessments of the bodies to look for evidence of why they died and disease. I think the drones are pretty effective at getting measurements. So and the beauty of that with the drones is you can measure thousands of walruses with just a couple dozen flights that are and be able to select them from throughout the herd, different parts of the herd, outer edge of the herd. So that may be a nice way to get direct measurements, but getting local impressions would be really helpful. And in terms of using the satellite imagery in Russia, it's like, well, the first question is like, who would we give that to in the Russian authority? Which authorities will we give that to, and what would be what mechanism could there be? Maybe there's mechanisms through international maritime organizations that work with the vessel operators. I don't know.
What about
And the
State
last
Department? Is that a thought? Sorry to interrupt.
my wheelhouse.
Okay,
Okay.
keep
Here
going.
we know the native village of Point Ley. We email these to them directly or text them directly and send that directly to the North Slope Borough and to the federal managers, Fish and Wildlife Service. So there were a number of known contacts who could take action and work with barge companies. On the Russian side, I don't know what's possible. So I really turned to the Marine Mammal Commission to ask those sorts of questions.
I'm listening to you, Tony. Thank you so much.
State Department, Sue, that, at least we have some connections in Nome with them. And if anyone else in the Nome audience here have ideas, sounds like Sue's got her ears open tonight, like she always does. So, and she's with us tonight. So, so if you have an idea on how to make that happen, we'd all like to hear it.
And I just want to
go
pull
ahead,
something
Tony.
with that question. Is like, we have the ability to look anywhere they are. And here's a quick teaser plot that I just wanted to show. We can look every year and we can look at numerous locations and get some idea there about what's going on and where they are in large numbers. So we have that ability. It takes some staff time to do that. It also takes working with other agencies to gain that access. So it takes federal scientists to be working on it if we want to provide that data to people who are working with the ships.
Thank you, Tony. That's
Thanks,
a tough one.
Tony.
I do want to say thank you, Sue. Didn't mean to step on you. In the chat, and I don't know, Rick Toman has written it directly. So Rick, if you want to share it, that image, or maybe I actually have a slide or two to share since Tony called me out on the ship stuff. I went back and found a slide that might be of interest. And
Yeah,
I can share that.
stop sharing.
But Bering Sea, Rick Toman says the Bering Sea ice extent is 5th lowest on record for February 5th. And the latest rounds, he does show a graph that's impressive in how weak our ice is, the latest southerly blow that brought this warm weather that we're experiencing with freezing drizzle and fog tonight has pushed the ice back quite a bit. So let's see. He's dropping it in for all of you. There
So
you
here,
go.
so
Go
we're
ahead,
at fifth lowest since 1979, but here's the scary thing. As of yesterday, the sea ice extent in the Bering Sea is less than it was by a little bit in 2019. And 2019, of course, was the Iditarod with open water at the beach in Nome.
All right. And thank you, Rick. I think for us as well, I believe there's a southeasterly storm that's supposed to hit us this weekend as well that will push potentially ice back north. I would imagine it's coming in with some strength. Is that
Yeah.
correct, Rick?
Yeah,
Yeah.
ice is not going to be expanding in the Bering anytime soon. We may see some increase on the Russian side as they'll be on the colder side of this storm, but for the Alaska side, we're going to continue to compact ice on south-facing shores.
Thank you so much, Rick, for that. And for that interesting graphic right there. Привет, Edward. I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gay. I just want to say a couple of words and thanks to thank you to Tony Fischbach because he invited me to his project, and I think we will have really exciting opportunity to involve indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge into this project, into the knowledge about walrus haulout. And what I want to notice that people not sometimes, often so shy. We think we don't remember anything from the past, from the knowledge. But if the conversation is going appropriate and in a good manner, people just some individuals just say, "Wow, I even didn't know. Oh, I knew that." So people sometimes really surprised what we know about what is happening just around them, and from the childhood, from the adolescent. And I think if everything would be good, and I can come to Point Lay with Tony Fischbach, we can do that. We can help Point Lay community to build their own draw of walrus haulout, how we did it, how we do it, how we want to be in the future, and we can use it for the science, for self-governance, and for the management. Yeah, thank you, Tony.
Good.
Thank you, Edward. Do you have any news actually that you can share from Chukotka regarding walrus this year? Is there any, you're just like us, no comms?
Of course, I have some connection to my fellow co-villagers and to my relatives in Neshkan and in Urmina, all of them. And I know you know, and I think I'm sure Rick Toman also know that this summer was really harsh for my fellow co-villagers. You see, I stayed on the shore, so yeah, people was not able to go on the edge of this sea ice field, so to harvest walruses. It was not good. But after all, we managed to harvest. So not super bad news, so super good news, but still like, and it was really a big surprise with summer. It's like 1980s coming back. What? My cousin told me. Yeah.
So actually, not to take away, Tony, but just to segue for a second, Edward, that's really important about the ice. We did notice that all summer, and it did come down past Diomede even in summertime, that ice that was right up against that northeast Chukotkin coast. Rick, do you have a quick explanation for Edward onto what happened so that he can call back and maybe provide some information?
Before Rick begin his talk, I'd like to share that sometimes my fellow co-villagers ask me to send them the satellite image of sea ice. So yes, it's really important. Thank you, Gay. You asking? Yeah.
Yeah, so that area got a lot of, we were looking at that closely. One of the things that stood out to the sea ice experts was that the ice there between the northeast Chukotka coast up towards Wrangel Island was very dirty looking on the imagery. And the thought is that had been ice was rafted enough that it was pushed all the way down to the ocean bottom, and so that the dirty ice was actually reflecting sediment that had become embedded in the ices that was rafted up, probably due to very persistent north winds in the spring. And then like we had in 2023, also apparently quite a strong East Siberian coastal current as well probably played a role in that. But yes, definitely we have not seen ice last all summer in that northeast Chukotka coast area since the late 1990s. So really, in what was otherwise quite a low sea ice year for the Arctic in 2024, that was one area that stood out. And as always, a combination of things produced that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Take that. Pass that if you can. Back to the pinniped, back to walrus. So Tony, you have that walrus lying down. That's a zoo captive animal, and they're measuring it, and then they're gonna, right, you take your photograph out from outer space or with your drone, and then you can see the difference and kind of get an idea on the health. We also hear from the NOAA Polar Ecosystem Program ice seal research biologists, and they're we see them with like captive bearded seals and spotted seals and things like that. This looks very similar. Are you guys linking up on your results about, or in your, even in your work? I think they're coming up in ships, and they do this with the Dyson, I think is the name of the NOAA ship, and they're south of St. Lawrence Island, or sometimes they have to be closer. Are you guys matching up your results and your data?
So, so we've collected dozens of surveys this last year. Going through and doing the measurement, that's a lot of labor. Each survey we have to carefully go through and find ones that are just right. If we can show one here, that is, we have to go in here and identify those that are laying just right, and then make those measurements. This is a very labor-intensive effort. It'll take probably a month of work for somebody to do that and pull it up. So so we're still working on trying to hire somebody for that. We have a hiring freeze right now, so we're working through those processes. It's not like we don't have anything to share yet. We collected the imagery. We need to do that workup. We are working closely with Donna Hauser's student, Megan Connor. She's using the same methodology on shore, using small drones to see if she can do the same measurements with ice seals. She's had success showing that she can do it safely. This is the same program we had done when we first got interested in using drones with walrus on shore. We had to first determine what altitude is safe. So she's done that work. The next step in that tool set is then to go out there and start measuring that. And of course, if you measure it 1 year, well, that's interesting, but how do you relate that to what's gone before? You need to be doing it as a regular methodology. It's an exciting methodology because it's something that can be eventually put into the hands of local people. You have to do a lot of go gadget work with it. You have to manage, you know, files and little memory cards and get things to the right place. And then you have to spend that month of time measuring and doing all that. We're hoping that can be brought into some level of automation through some artificial intelligence. There are some tools we're interested in, but again, it takes time to build that method. Currently, we simply know that we've been able to relate real measurements of real walruses in hand that these trainers were able to make and determine we can make the same measurements. And then we're able to relate that back to Bukhtiarov's data. And many of you may remember Yuri Bukhtiarov, who oversaw the Soviet harvest back in the day. There was a very, very active industrial harvest the Soviets conducted from the 1930s onward until 1990. From 1970 onward, US scientists were able to get with the Soviet harvesters and make measurements of the body condition. And recently we've been able to work with those measurements and find that these body condition measurements were a good index about what was going on in the population. So we're hoping to be able to use it in that manner.
Awesome. Awesome. And a nice comment also from Gavin Brady, who's working, I think, on body condition as well in the seals.
Oh.
Good. Any other questions for Tony Fischbach? At this point, you know, you did kind of put me on, and so I guess I better show up my slides. And this is, I don't mean to take away from your thing, but you did mention ship traffic, and you did say, so just as everybody might know.
Communication.
What's that?
This is all about communication to the community.
That's correct.
I've got my role to play. I wish Robert could have played his, but you're here to play it too.
Yep. So here we go. Let's see. Can I share this? Share. And then that's Rick. That's for everybody. I would recommend downloading that. That's Rick's ice map he just gave to everybody. So you can see that retreat as the ice went down quite rapidly in our last southerly. But this is just, and this is not part of his presentation. I'm just an amateur that is real nosy because it's hard to get information on where these commercial vessels are. This was a screenshot and I kind of pieced together. This is the area, the yellow circles, the area. This is last, or whatever this is, 2023 in the fall. The red line denotes where our United States commercial fishery for federally managed species like pollock and cod and things like that, where it ends. We have a small in US waters in Kotzebue, we have a small state fishery for chum salmon that's like 3 weeks, I think. And that's for chum, and that's a state fishery, and that's in Kotzebue, and that's just for Kotzebue peoples. So we don't see the big trawlers like we are now seeing. So this is a picture from 2010. I just pieced together. You want to know what Gay does in her spare time. And these are the actual tracking down the ships. These are the actual vessels that were up there. And then for fall time, I kind of did just kept track of it. And this is really gross. I think I said, Tony, to you that they were opposite Point Lay. They weren't at that far north. They were opposite, though, on the line off of Point Hope. And so now we see vessels coming up in, and when you think about Walrus, we see vessels coming up, fishing vessels, commercial, industrial, what looks to be trawlers, based on the name, coming and spending most of their time off that northeast corner of Chukotka, and then further sort of south central Chukchi Sea on the maritime boundary line, very, very close to that. And then last but not least, because we have people from St. Lawrence Island on this call, or on this evening presentation. For those who are unaware, that's St. Lawrence Island on the right. The green line is our boundary, maritime boundary separating the Russian Federation from, or Chukotka, I should say, from Alaska. And then the gray circles are some of the communities right across the way from St. Lawrence Island. And this body of water here is called the Gulf of Anadyr. And on our solstice this year, so December 21st, Rick was mentioning about the ice is very low in the Bering Sea region, and we had 2 areas. You can see where the little cartoon blue triangles are. Those are the vessels in 2 different locations actively fishing north of Gamble, actually, in the case of the ones that are in that northwestern Gulf of Anadir. And there are pictures of what I can get off the internet of the actual vessels in that picture. So in the darkest days of winter beginning, we actually now, and I was asking, has anyone seen commercial fishing this far north ever? I asked NOAA Fisheries, and they don't track that. I don't think they've had to or had any need to in the past, but it's something we need to think about now, and think about who other are, as our winter residents come home, like Walrus and Bowhead and that, now who are they have to interact with as well. So anyway, just interesting slides. Thank you, Tony, for mentioning that. And the I'll stop share. And the picture, your little TikTok video, that was a male Pacific walrus that was coming out of a trawl, the cod end of a trawl. So they'd caught it and they were had brought the net on board, and then they'd opened up the rope on the bottom, and that walrus was still alive, amazingly so. But that's what that short clip was, and that's a TikTok that you can get online and find it. Some of us have copies of it. So anyway, there you go. Don't mean to Budinsky into your thing with ships, but you did mention vessel traffic, and I scurried around in the back trying to find my oddball slides. So thank you. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
With that, any other questions we're past our mark. You guys have all been great to stay tuned in. Oh, Rebecca's given a clap. You've got all kinds of good stuff. With that, we'll say, before you guys go out of here, we will have next Thursday, the 13th, Strait Science will be spectacular shorebird migrations. We're going to have Rosie Bathrick. She's a PhD candidate studying shorebirds in our area, and I think beyond. She's using satellite link tags on these shorebirds. It must be itty bitty tags for itty bitty birds. And she's going to give us results of her study and more about several shorebird species and their spectacular migrations in and out of the Seward Peninsula and beyond. So stay tuned for that. That'll be next Thursday night. And we'll call it a close. Tony, if you can hang on for a sec, that would be wonderful afterwards. And we'll let everyone go. Think kind thoughts tonight for Nome. And if you live in Nome, be kind, and know that people are under there's all kinds of reasons to be extra kind, and think of everyone in Nome tonight, and our region, actually, the whole region. So with that, thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you next week. Have a good night, everybody.